My hand was trembling. Not just from the excitement, but from a deep, buzzing fear. I had been dreaming of this moment for a year, and now it was real. The small, beautiful diamond on my finger felt as heavy as a stone. Antoine and I were finally engaged. We were at the grand Blackwood estate for Sunday brunch, and this was the moment I would finally be welcomed as part of the family. Antoine squeezed my hand, pushed me forward gently. "Go on," he whispered. "Show her." I walked toward his mother, Genevieve Blackwood, who was standing by the fireplace, looking as cold and perfect as the marble statue beside her. "Genevieve," I said, my voice barely a squeak. "Antoine and I have some wonderful news." I held out my left hand. Her eyes scanned my face, then dropped to my hand. The room fell silent. I could feel the eyes of the staff on my back. Genevieve stared at the ring. Her painted lips twitched. Then, she let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was a sound like breaking glass. "My goodness," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I told him that ring was a starter." "Amélie, darling, you're a sweet girl, but—" She looked up, her eyes pinning me in place. "My son can do better than this. And frankly, so can you." My world stopped. My smile froze. Shame washed over me, hot and red. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, paralyzed by her words, as her laughter echoed in the huge, silent room. Have you ever had a moment so awful you wished the floor would swallow you? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to follow for more. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, before I turned and ran. I fled to the gardens, my cheeks burning and tears blurring the perfect roses. I could still hear her laugh, still see the pitying looks from the staff. I found a stone bench and finally let myself cry, my shoulders shaking. I felt so small, so stupid. Was this a test? Was this just what rich people did? A few minutes later, I heard footsteps on the gravel. It was Antoine. He looked stressed, but not angry for me. "Amélie, there you are," he said, sitting beside me. "Look, you just have to ignore her." Ignore her. I wiped my face, my voice thick. "Antoine, she humiliated me. In front of everyone. She said you could do better." He sighed, running a hand through his perfect hair. "You know how she is. She's from an older generation. She was just joking. It's how she is." "That wasn't a joke," I whispered. "That was cruel." I wanted him to rage. I wanted him to charge inside and defend me. Instead, he took my hand, his grip a little too tight. "Babe, please," he said, his voice low. "Don't make this a problem. It's just a ring. Don't let her ruin this. Just let it go. For me." I looked at his handsome, pleading face. My heart sank. He wasn't defending me. He was asking me to swallow the poison so he wouldn't have to deal with his mother. I was completely, terrifyingly on my own. I nodded, wiping my last tear. "Okay," I whispered, the word tasting like ash. "For you." The next day, Genevieve called me. Her voice was bright and sweet, as if nothing had happened. "Amélie, darling, I feel we got off on the wrong foot. I want to make it up to you." My stomach twisted, but Antoine was giving me a hopeful look, mouthing, "See? It's fine." I forced my voice to be light. "Oh, that's so nice of you, Genevieve." "Wonderful. As a peace offering, I will plan your engagement party. It will be my gift to you both." This didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a trap. "But," she continued, "I need you to handle one tiny thing for me. Just the flowers. It should be simple for you, a landscape expert." I am a landscape architect. I design parks and public spaces. I'm not a florist, but I knew she knew that. "Of course," I said. "What did you have in mind?" "Just one arrangement," she said, her voice silky. The midnight orchid. It was the flower at my engagement party. It's very special to the Blackwood family. My blood ran cold. The midnight orchid. I'd only read about it in textbooks. It wasn't just rare, it was rumored to be almost impossible to get. It grew on one specific, remote mountain, and it only bloomed for a few days a year under a full moon. This wasn't a peace offering. This was an impossible task. She was setting me up to fail, to prove I wasn't good enough. "I'll see what I can do," I said, my hand gripping the phone. "Excellent," she purred, and hung up. I stared at the wall, the message clear: find this flower, or you don't belong. For a week, I called every contact I had. I called rare plant importers, university botanical gardens, and specialty florists from New York to Los Angeles. The answer was always the same. Laughter. "The midnight orchid? Are you kidding?" one importer asked. "You'd have better luck finding a living dinosaur." I was desperate. My reputation wasn't just about a party, it was about proving Genevieve wrong. My search led me to online forums, and I saw a name mentioned in a tiny, old post: Etienne. He supposedly ran a small, private nursery that specialized in difficult plants. I found the address. It wasn't a fancy nursery. It was a community garden, tucked away in a part of the city I'd never been to, surrounded by a chain-link fence covered in bright green vines. I found a man in his late 30s, with intense eyes and dirt under his fingernails, quietly turning compost. "Etienne?" I asked. He looked up. "Can I help you?" "I hope so. This is going to sound crazy, but I'm looking for the midnight orchid." He stopped working. He just stared at me. "I know it's impossible," I rushed on, "but it's for my fiancé's family. The Blackwoods." The moment I said the name, his entire body changed. His shoulders tensed. His friendly eyes went cold and hard. He stood up straight, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I can't help you," he said, his voice flat. "Do you know them?" I asked, my heart sinking. "What's wrong?" He just looked past me, at the fence. "You should go. We don't have what you're looking for." I didn't move. "Please," I said, my voice breaking. "You don't understand. His mother, she's testing me. If I fail this, I don't think she'll let this wedding happen." Etienne looked at me for a long, hard moment. He saw the desperation in my eyes. He sighed, the anger in his face softening just a little into something like pity. "The midnight orchid," he said, his voice low. "People call it that to sound romantic. Around here, we call it the blood orchid." My stomach clenched. "Why?" "Because it only grows in one place. To get it, importers have to hire poachers who destroy the entire habitat, clear-cutting the forest just to find one bloom. It's not rare. It's stolen. It's a flower that kills everything around it." I felt sick. This is what Genevieve wanted. A flower that represented destruction. He saw the look on my face and walked over to a small, unassuming green plant. It had a tiny, delicate flower, a pale blue I had never seen before. "This," he said, gently touching a petal. "This is the resilience bloom. It's a local flower. People think it's a weed. But it can grow through concrete. It survives floods and droughts. It cleans the soil around it." He looked at me. "This one doesn't have to destroy anything to be beautiful." He cut one and handed it to me. I held the simple, powerful flower in my hand, and I felt like he had just handed me a choice. I knew what I had to do. I drove back to the Blackwood estate, my courage high. I wasn't just going to tell Genevieve no. I was going to tell her why. I was going to show her Etienne's flower and explain that I couldn't ethically source her blood orchid. I walked in the front door, my heart pounding with my new, brave speech. The butler nodded at me, his face unreadable. "Mrs. Blackwood is in the drawing room, Miss Amélie." I walked to the door, took a deep breath, and pushed it open. But Genevieve wasn't there. It was Antoine. And he wasn't alone. Sitting on the couch with him, so close their knees were touching, was Delphine. His ex-girlfriend. An heiress from a family even richer than the Blackwoods. They were laughing, their heads bent over a laptop. I froze in the doorway, hidden by the shadow. "This ballroom is perfect," Delphine said, tapping the screen. "And the caterer is already locked in. Mother is so relieved." "You're a lifesaver," Antoine said, his voice warm in a way I hadn't heard in weeks. "I just want everything to be perfect." I looked at the laptop screen. It was a 3D model of a grand wedding reception. And in the corner of the screen, I saw the date they were planning for. It was my wedding date. My blood turned to ice. My breath caught in my throat. They didn't see me. They were too busy. I backed away slowly, my hand over my mouth, the small, resilient flower still crushed in my fist. Was he planning 2 weddings? I stumbled back out into the hall, my mind racing. I felt like I was going to be sick. It had to be a mistake. A misunderstanding. I ran to the garden, gulping in the air. I waited, pacing, until I heard Antoine's voice calling my name. "Amélie, the butler said you were here. What's wrong? You look pale." I went to the drawing room, I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I saw you. With Delphine. You were looking at wedding venues. For our date, Antoine." His face changed. For a second, I saw pure panic. But it vanished, replaced by something dark. Anger. He exploded, but not in the way I expected. He exploded at me. "Are you spying on me now?" he hissed, his voice low and furious. "Is that what this is? I can't even have a conversation with an old friend." "An old friend? You were planning a wedding." "Delphine's parents are helping us," he shot back. "They're friends of the family. They're helping us book that venue as a favor because it's so exclusive. And you run out here, accusing me? My God, Amélie, why do you have to be so insecure? Why do you always have to be so dramatic?" The attack was so fast, so complete, that my head spun. He turned the tables so perfectly. Suddenly, I was the bad guy. I was the one who was spying and insecure. He made me feel crazy. I'm sorry," I whispered, tears welling up again. I saw her, and I." "Just stop," he said, his voice cold. "You're making this into something it's not. Again." He made me apologize to him. And I did. I hated myself for it, but I did. A few days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Miss Amélie, this is Mr. Harrison, from the Blackwood family's legal firm. We need you to come in this afternoon to sign some documents." "Documents?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "What documents?" "Just the standard pre-nuptial agreement," he said, his voice bored. 2 o'clock. Don't be late." I hung up the phone, feeling cold. A prenup. Of course. I had expected it. But when I arrived at the high-rise office, it wasn't what I thought it would be. Mr. Harrison, a man with a face like a dried-up lemon, didn't even smile. He just slid a thick document across the polished table. "Sign here, here, and here," he said, tapping the pages. I opened it. My eyes scanned the first page. And the second. And the third. This wasn't a prenup. It was a lifestyle contract. My blood drained from my face. It dictated my public behavior, what I could and could not post on social media. It had a fidelity clause that was completely one-sided, with a massive financial penalty for me. But the worst part, the part that made me feel sick, was the clause about children. It stated that any and all children would be raised exclusively under the Blackwood family's guidance. They would have full control over their education, their upbringing, everything. This wasn't a marriage. It was an acquisition. "This is standard for the Blackwoods," the lawyer said, seeing my expression. You need to sign it by Friday. I walked out of that office in a daze. The contract was heavy in my bag, heavy as a brick. I couldn't go home. I couldn't talk to Antoine, not after he'd made me feel crazy about Delphine. My feet just moved. I found myself back at the community garden. It was the only place I had felt safe all week. Etienne was there, watering rows of tomato plants. He saw me, and the look on my face must have told him everything. He just sighed, put down the watering can, and gestured to a bench. "What did they do now?" he asked. I was shaking. I couldn't even speak. I just pulled the thick contract from my bag and handed it to him. His eyebrows shot up as he read. He flipped through the pages, his expression growing darker and darker. He spent a long time on the children clause, his jaw tight. "My God," he whispered. He finally looked up at me, his eyes full of a sad, angry fire. "Amélie," he said, his voice low. "You need to listen to me. I haven't told many people this. I used to be a journalist. A financial journalist." He pointed to a faint scar on his temple. "I got this scar because I got too close to a story. A story about how the Blackwood family really built their empire. They didn't just outsmart their rivals. They destroyed them. They blacklisted me. I lost everything." He tapped the contract. "This isn't a prenup. It's an ownership contract. They don't want a daughter-in-law. They want to acquire an asset. They want to silence you. If you sign this, you're gone." I left the garden with Etienne's warning echoing in my ears. They want to acquire an asset. I went home, my mind made up. I was terrified, but I had to stand up for myself. When Antoine came home, I was sitting on the couch with the prenup on the coffee table. "We need to talk," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I'm not signing this." I explained why. I told him the clauses were inhuman. That it wasn't a marriage, it was a business deal. He didn't get angry like I expected. He got quiet. "You're making a mistake, Amélie," he said, his voice cold. "A very big mistake." He left the apartment, and I spent the night staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my boss, and he sounded frantic. "Amélie, what did you do?" "What? What are you talking about?" "Our biggest project. The one you designed, the new city park? It's been hit with a stop work order from the city. Effective immediately." My blood ran cold. "Why?" "I don't know," he yelled. "Something about an anonymous tip. Environmental code violations. The tip is full of technical jargon. Jargon about historical preservation." My stomach dropped. Historical preservation. Genevieve Blackwood sat on the city's historical board. This was her. She was attacking my career. She was showing me, in no uncertain terms, what I stood to lose. My boss's voice was grim. "Amélie, if we can't fix this, the company is liable. You are liable. This could ruin us." I was in a full-blown panic. I called Antoine, sobbing. "Your mother," I cried. "She's destroying my career. She put a stop work order on my project." Antoine rushed home, his face a mask of concern. "I'll handle this," he said, his voice firm. "I'll talk to her." He left, and I paced the apartment for hours, feeling trapped. That evening, he returned, looking tired but proud. "It's done," he announced. "She's sorry. She overreacted. She's calling her friends on the board. The stop work order will be lifted by morning." I felt a wave of relief so strong my knees buckled. But the relief was followed by something else. A cold, sick feeling. I had won, but only because he'd asked his mother to call off her attack. I was completely under their control. The next day, Genevieve herself showed up at my apartment. She was all smiles. "My dear, I am so sorry for that tiny misunderstanding. All fixed. She held up a small, elegant box. As a congratulations on the project, and, well, on everything, I have a gift for you. I opened it. Inside was a single, antique key. It's to a beautiful little cottage, upstate, Genevieve smiled, her eyes glittering. A place for you to go when the stress of the city gets to be too much. Consider it an early wedding present. It didn't feel like a present. It felt like a warning. That weekend, Antoine insisted we drive upstate to see the cottage. You'll love it, Amélie, he said, all smiles. It's our escape. The drive was long, winding through empty roads until we were deep in the woods. The cottage itself was beautiful, made of stone and covered in ivy, overlooking a private lake. It was also totally isolated. It's stunning, I said, trying to sound excited. Then I looked at my phone. No signal. Not a single bar. Oh, yeah, Antoine laughed. No service up here. It's for unplugging. A cold knot formed in my stomach. That night, we sat by the fire, and Antoine seemed happier than I'd seen him in months. It's perfect, isn't it? He said, staring into the flames. So quiet. So peaceful. Later, I went to the kitchen to get some water. I heard him in the other room, his voice low. I thought he was talking to himself until I realized he must be on the cottage's landline. I crept closer, my heart pounding. It was his mother. She's loving it, Antoine was saying, his voice smooth. Completely obsessed with the place. He laughed. Don't worry, Mom. You were right. After the wedding, she'll be happy to retire up here. She can, what did you call it? Focus on being a wife. It's the perfect solution. My hand flew to my mouth. I stumbled back, knocking over a glass. The landline clicked. He knew I'd heard. The gift wasn't an escape. It was a golden cage. It was a beautiful, remote prison where they planned to store me after I had signed my life away. Amélie. Antoine called out, his voice suddenly sharp. What are you doing? I scrambled to pick up the broken glass, my hands shaking. Nothing. I dropped a glass. He appeared in the doorway, his eyes narrowed. He stared at me, then at the landline, and he knew. But he didn't say anything. He just smiled, a tight, cold smile. Be more careful, he said. We drove back to the city the next morning in heavy, awful silence. He was being extra sweet, which was even scarier. When we got to my apartment, I grabbed my bag. Oh, shoot, I said, forcing a light laugh. I left my work laptop at the cottage. I have to go back for it. I'll get it next weekend, he said, too quickly. No, I need it for Monday, I insisted. I'll just use yours to email my boss and let him know. Before he could object, I walked into his home office and sat at his desk. I opened his laptop. His email was already open. I clicked compose, my hands shaking. I was pretending to type an email, my mind racing. How could I get out of this? Just as I was about to close it, a new email popped up in his inbox. The sender was Delphine. My heart stopped. The subject line was, timeline. I clicked it. The message was short. Did she sign it yet? We need to stick to the timeline, Antoine. My father is getting impatient. My blood ran cold. Timeline? Frantic, I typed Delphine into his search bar. A hidden folder popped up. It wasn't named Wedding. It was named Project DB Merger. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely click the mouse. Project DB Merger. Delphine. Blackwood. I opened the folder. It was filled with spreadsheets, legal documents, and timelines. It wasn't a wedding plan. It was a business plan. I clicked on the main proposal. My eyes scanned the words, but my brain couldn't understand them. The union of Blackwood Consolidated and Delphine Industries. The wedding of Antoine Blackwood and Delphine. Signing bonus. To be finalized on August 22nd. My wedding date. I read it again. And again. It wasn't a mistake. The entire document detailed a multi-billion-dollar merger between the two family companies. The final act, the thing that would seal the deal, was the wedding of Antoine and Delphine. My engagement, my ring, the party, it was all a lie. I wasn't the bride. I was a smokescreen. A distraction. The documents even mentioned me, under a heading called Potential Liabilities. They were using me to keep Antoine occupied and away from Delphine, probably to drive up the price of the merger. I was just a pawn in their disgusting game. I wasn't a person they were hurting. I was a liability they were managing. I felt the room spin. I grabbed the edge of the desk, gagging, as the full, cold, and calculated reality of the past year hit me like a physical blow. I printed it. I printed every single page of that merger. The timelines, the contracts, the emails between Antoine and his mother and Delphine's father. I was standing in the living room, the papers clutched in my hand, when he walked in. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice casual. He saw the papers in my hand. The color drained from his face. "Amélie." "Project DB merger," I said, my voice dead. "That's what you're calling me now?" I threw the papers on the coffee table. Was any of it real? Or was I just a potential liability from the start? The mask dropped. The charming, conflicted Antoine I thought I knew, he just vanished. In his place was a cold, weak stranger. His face twisted into a sneer. "You were never supposed to see that," he said. "It's just business, Amélie. You wouldn't understand." "Business?" I choked out. "My life is just businesses." "Oh, come on," he scoffed. "You were an intern when I met you. You were supposed to be grateful. Look at this apartment. Look at the life I gave you." He actually laughed. "You're getting a huge payout from the prenup once this is all settled. I made sure of it. You're getting exactly what you wanted." I stared at him, my heart turning to ice. What I wanted? "Yes," he shouted. "Isn't that what your kind of people want? Money. You get a nice, clean break with millions. All you had to do was sign the papers and be quiet. But you couldn't even do that." I couldn't feel my own face. I was numb. "The prenup," I whispered. "And the cottage. It was all real. You were just going to pay me off and stick me in a house in the woods." "It's a beautiful house," he yelled, as if that made it better. "And what about my job?" I asked, the last piece clicking into place. "That stop work order. That was your mother, wasn't it? Showing me what I stood to lose." He let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "My mother," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You really are naive. My mother wanted to lift the order. She was worried you'd get suspicious." My blood stopped. What are you talking about?" He stepped closer, his face dark with rage. "That stop work order on your little project? That was my idea, not my mother's. She's clumsy. I had to show you, really show you, what you stood to lose. I had to make you need us. I had to make you grateful when I saved you." That was it. That was the blow that finally broke me. It wasn't Genevieve, the obvious monster. It was him. The man I loved. The man I had defended. The man I had agreed to marry. He had personally, deliberately, and strategically tried to ruin my entire career, just to control me. He was the real villain. He had been all along. I just stared at him, this stranger in my apartment, and I felt nothing but cold, empty space. I looked down at my hand. The ring, the starter ring, felt like it was burning my skin. It was the symbol of the whole lie. I looked up from the ring and met his furious, ugly gaze. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. All the fear, all the hurt, it just vanished. It was replaced by a quiet, cold calm. I finally saw him. I saw all of them. They weren't powerful. They were pathetic. They were parasites who had to destroy things to feel big. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled the diamond ring off my finger. It left a pale, indented mark on my skin. Antoine watched me, his expression changing from anger to confusion. "What are you doing?" he asked. I didn't answer him. I walked over to the coffee table, where the Project DB merger papers were spread out. I took the ring, and I placed it very gently on top of the signature line that was meant for Delphine's father. I looked at Antoine. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a knife. "You're right," I said. "You can do better than this ring." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Then I smiled, a real smile, for the first time in months. "But I can do better than you." I picked up my purse. I walked to the front door, my back straight. "Amélie!" "Wait!" he yelled, panic finally in his voice. "You can't just. Amélie!" I opened the door and walked out. I didn't look back. I just closed the door on my old life, and I never felt more free. I walked for hours. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move. My feet, as if they had a mind of their own, led me back to the one place that felt real. The community garden. It was late, and the gates were locked. I just stood there, gripping the chain-link fence, finally letting the sobs come. I was crying so hard I didn't hear the footsteps behind me. Amélie. It was Etienne. He lived in a small apartment above the garden's tool shed. What happened? I told him. I told him everything. The merger. Delphine. The cottage. The stop work order being Antoine's idea. I held onto the fence, the story pouring out of me in a messy, angry, broken flood. He listened. He just listened, his face growing harder and harder with every word. When I was finished, I was exhausted. I just ran. I whispered. "I don't know what to do." Etienne was silent for a long moment. He unlocked the gate and led me inside, sitting me on the same bench as before. "You did the right thing," he said, his voice low and intense. "For years," he said, "I've been gathering evidence on the Blackwoods, on their corrupt deals. But I was always missing one thing. The why. The human cost. They didn't just ruin my career. I know now they've ruined others." He looked at me, his eyes full of fire. "Genevieve is hosting the City Heritage Ball next week. It's her biggest night of the year. She's being given the key to the city by the mayor." He clenched his fists. "I think it's time we gave her a different kind of key." "I don't want to just expose them," I said, my voice hoarse. "I don't want to be like them. I don't want to destroy. I want to build." Etienne smiled for the first time. "That's why we're going to win." For the next 3 days, we worked. We didn't sleep. My revenge wouldn't be a messy tabloid scandal. It would be precise. It would be my work. I went back to my old boss, the one whose project I had saved. I told him the truth. All of it. He was furious, but not at me. He was furious at the Blackwoods for using his company. He gave me access to all the project files. I took my original design for the city park, the one they had tried to kill, and I made it better. I redesigned it around the community garden. I showed how the Blackwood donations to the city were just fronts to buy up land, displace people, and build more empty, sterile high-rises. My new proposal wasn't just a park. It was a counter-proposal. It was a brilliant, sustainable, and public space that would save the garden and create a real, thriving center for the community. I used my landscape architecture skills, the very skills Genevieve had mocked, as my weapon. I wasn't just saving my job. I was saving my new community. I was saving myself. As I finished the final rendering, I felt a power I had never felt before. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was an architect. This is brilliant, Etienne said, looking at the plans. But it's not enough to just have a better idea. Genevieve controls the mayor. She controls the board. They'll never let you present this. They will, I said, a cold certainty in my voice. Because we're not going to the board. We're going to the board's wives. Etienne and I spent the next 2 days tracking down the other victims. We found the family who had been legally pushed out of their apartment building so Genevieve could have a better view. We found the small business owner Antoine had bankrupted with a fake lawsuit. We found 3 other women he had proposed to with starter rings right before a big business deal. We weren't going to the press. We were going directly to the other wealthy families on the Heritage Ball Committee. I scheduled a tea with a woman named Mrs. Dubois, the one person in the city who was old money rivals with Genevieve. I didn't share rumors. I didn't cry. I laid out my park proposal. And then, I showed her my prenup. I showed her the lifestyle contract. Mrs. Dubois, a woman in pearls, was horrified. Not by the cruelty, she'd seen that before. She was disgusted by the sloppiness. To put this in writing, she whispered, her eyes wide. How common. She looked at my park plans, then back at the prenup. A slow, shark-like smile spread across her face. My dear, she said, tapping the plans. I think we need to make a small change to the evening's program. The night of the City Heritage Ball arrived. My stomach was a knot of terrified butterflies. I wasn't in $1,000 couture gown. I was wearing a simple, elegant dark blue dress I'd owned for years. In my hair, I wore the small, resilient flower Etienne had given me. He was my date, looking surprisingly sharp in a rented tux. We walked up the marble steps to the grand ballroom. Inside, the room was glittering. Genevieve was at the center of it all, accepting compliments, her laugh tinkling over the orchestra. Antoine was beside her, looking bored. Then, he saw me. His face went white. He grabbed his mother's arm. Her head snapped toward me. I saw the pure, unfiltered rage in her eyes. Security. Genevieve hissed, signaling to a guard. She is not on the list. Get her out. The guard, a huge man, began walking toward me, his hand on his earpiece. Antoine started walking toward me too, his face a mask of fury. What do you think you're doing, Amélie? I stood my ground. My heart was pounding, but I didn't flinch. I just looked past him, toward the main doors. I'm just waiting for my friends, I said. As the security guard reached for my arm, the main ballroom doors swung open. He froze. Everyone froze. The music stopped. It wasn't a celebrity. It wasn't a politician. It was Etienne, walking in with a quiet confidence. And behind him, walking in as invited guests, was the entire community garden group. The gardeners, the volunteers, the families from the neighborhood, all in their Sunday best. They looked around, wide-eyed but proud. Genevieve and Antoine just stared, their mouths open. What is this? Genevieve demanded, her voice shaking with rage. Mrs. Dubois, the rival matriarch, glided to the microphone on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, her voice booming through the silent room. We have a wonderful surprise. Due to a clerical error in our original program, we have a new beneficiary for this evening's charity fund. Genevieve's smile was frozen, a terrible mask of horror. Please join me in welcoming the heart and soul of our city's downtown, the Resilience Community Garden. The room was stunned. But Mrs. Dubois had planted her friends in the crowd. They started clapping. The rest of the room, confused, joined in. Genevieve was trapped. She couldn't kick out the charity beneficiary at her own ball. She was forced to stand there, smiling and clapping, as Etienne and his entire community walked past her to the VIP tables reserved at the front. Her face was pale, and I could see a muscle twitching in her jaw. She knew she had lost control. The rest of the evening was a blur. Genevieve and Antoine stayed in their corner, whispering furiously. People were avoiding them. The buzz in the room was no longer about Genevieve. It was about the gardeners. Finally, the moment came. The mayor, looking nervous and sweaty, went to the podium. "And now," he stammered, "it is my great honor to present the key to the city to a true pillar of our community, Mrs. Genevieve Blackwood." There was scattered, weak applause. Genevieve walked to the stage, her face tight, her smile brittle. She accepted the large, fake golden key. She was about to speak, to give her victory speech, but Mrs. Du Bois stepped up to the microphone first. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And now, to accept the first donation of the evening on behalf of the Resilience Garden, may I please welcome Miss Amélie." The spotlight hit me. The entire room turned. I saw Antoine's face. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. I saw Genevieve, clutching her useless key, her knuckles white. I straightened my dress, touched the flower in my hair, and walked toward the stage. I walked right past Antoine. I walked right past Genevieve. I stood at the podium, took the microphone, and looked out at the silent, watching crowd. I had them. All of them. I took a deep breath. I looked right at Genevieve. "I have learned so much from the Blackwood family," I said, my voice clear and strong, carrying through the entire ballroom. The crowd leaned in. "Genevieve taught me that some things look beautiful," I said, my eyes flicking to the gaudy centerpiece. "Like midnight orchids. But when you find out what it takes to get them, you realize they're just rotten underneath." Gasps rippled through the room. Genevieve's face was white with rage. I turned my gaze to Antoine, who looked like he was going to be sick. "And Antoine," I said, my voice full of a new, bright confidence, "he taught me the true value of a starter project." The confusion in the room was electric. They knew this was personal. But before they could process it, I turned to the giant screen behind me. "But I'm not here to talk about the past," I said. "I'm here to talk about the future." I clicked a button. My design, the brilliant, beautiful, and full-funded proposal for the new Resilience Park, lit up the screen. For the next 5 minutes, I didn't talk about them. I talked about us. About the community. About building something that lasts. I didn't expose their crimes. I eclipsed them with my talent, my passion, and my vision. When I finished, there was a second of stunned silence. Then, Mrs. Du Bois stood up and began to clap. Then Etienne and the gardeners. Then the entire room erupted in a standing ovation. Genevieve was left on stage, holding her key, completely forgotten. 1 year later, I stood on that same plot of land. It was no longer just a garden. It was the Resilience Park. My design had won citywide acclaim and full funding, pushing the Blackwood high-rise project into permanent review. The park was full of people. Kids were playing. Families were having picnics. I saw the mayor, the same one who had given Genevieve the key, cutting a ribbon and smiling for the cameras. He waved at me. I just smiled and waved back. The Blackwood-Delphine merger had fallen apart. Once I'd shown Mrs. Du Bois the prenup, she had accidentally leaked it to Delphine's father. He was furious that the Blackwoods would be so careless and had pulled out of the deal, citing unreliable partners. Genevieve was a social outcast. Antoine had reportedly been sent to manage an overseas branch in the middle of nowhere. I didn't care. I was kneeling in the dirt, planting a new row of the simple, blue flowers. My hands were dirty, and I had never been happier. "You missed a spot," a voice said. I looked up. Etienne was smiling, holding a watering can. He knelt beside me, his eyes matching the same blue as the flowers. He gently tucked one of the resilient blooms behind my ear. I wasn't wearing a diamond. I didn't have a contract. I was just free. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is not to fight back, but to build something better. If you believe in the power of building your own happy ending, share this story with someone who needs it. And follow us, because a new story of hope is always just around the corner.